Brought to you by Exabeam, I'm Steve Moore, and this is the new CISO. Alex, finally, thank you so much for joining us and making time for us. For the uninitiated, as I always say, Alex, who are you and what do you do?
Hey, folks. I'm Alex Rice. I'm the founder, chief technology officer, and CISO at HackerOne. I've been alternating between security and engineering roles my entire career and wearing both hats right now.
So we have a lot to talk about. One thing I'll tell you, tell the audience is that, well, first off, Alex has a new microphone, and this is a maiden voyage for this. He's a very polished speaker, but we're making him sound even better with this new mic, and hopefully it's not too attitudinal for us. So we're working on that. But I can tell you from the preparation call that we had, so we do a 30-minute prep call. He's got a lot of fantastic stuff to share, and I don't even know if we'll have enough time. I don't. One show might not even be enough with this guy. So where I typically lead off is, you say you were born a nerd. How'd you get your start in technology?
No, I had it easy. My dad was a an early programmer, early Fortran programmer, and yeah, a nerd and a daddy's boy led to a lot of easy access to technology and mentors early on, and it just stuck. It just stuck.
Alex, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a town of 400 in North Florida, which is the deep south.
What town? What's the name of the town? Come on.
Yep. Name of the town is Sop Choppy, Florida.
What?
Also, the place of Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, and me. That's it. That's what we got
Hey,
going for us.
uh, Gene Roddenberry, loves Star Trek. I used to watch that show with my father growing up. He, of course, back then, it was right when Next Generation came out. And I studied a little bit about Gene Roddenberry and his whole thing. I got to say this. He loved the story Wagon Train, which was a Western that basically a show that never ends. And so he based Star Trek on Wagon Train and loved all the things that they covered. So yeah, so I've never heard of this town, but you and Gene Roddenberry, that's a pretty good start for 400. Um, so you told me you made your first dollar writing code, and I'll tell you, I made my first dollar probably shoveling shit on the farm. And so you making it writing code is
Oh
pretty
no,
fascinating.
I've had a lot of tough jobs, but they all involved keyboards, and this is one of the things people hate about me. I'm sure I have some deep intrinsic character flaws from never having to work directly in service or hospitality industries or
No,
hard manual labor.
no,
But
I'm envious. I'm envious. I think that's fantastic. I mean, for as a side, what a great thing that there was an alignment between your father, his career, and seemingly the friendship that you had with your father, and that connectivity that got you started early. What a what a an amazing alignment to appreciate, like out of the gate, right? And so the
see,
fact that
there's
you,
really two things going into it. One was having that knowledge at home, but also it was a timing question. Like this was the mid 890s. There was not a lot of formal education around software engineering. There were plenty of opportunities for folks to learn on the job, and then that's what this was. I started out part time at a small application development shop, and had some really good hands on mentors there. And but it's the type of thing that like they you fast forward even 5 years and you weren't hiring people like me for those roles anymore. Like it was really just a moment in time where there was this brief window where people were taking bets on 14-year-olds to come write some code.
uh, which is amazing. Like that in and of itself is something to appreciate. I mean, you at this time, what is it? Basic, VB6. What are you working on?
But yeah, then we probably did the bulk of it was Visual Basic. I pray none of that code is still running anywhere, but it might be. It might be.
So you said you worked for a small consultant group, still in North Florida, seemingly. You told me you worked in time tracking and inventory, and I think even maybe a dentist's office. What is all that like? And are you in still in high school? Are you an undergrad? Are you doing something else? Like what's happening right now?
Yeah, I was. I started in high school. I ended up doing early graduation out of high school because they offered a full time role for us. I went straight from part time into full time with that role, and it was software for everybody, right? There wasn't a lot of off the shelf software for that. So it was spending a lot of time with small businesses, usually understanding what are your needs, what are you trying to solve. And it was all over the place, right? It was the school board, it was dentist shops, it was car maintenance places, and a lot of just basic stuff that we take for granted now. That's just early days of technology. I say it really taught me was that type of software engineering has a deep customer centricity to it. Like you're all in one of trying to understand requirements, what works, how are you going to use this, watching them use it. My mentor at the time was a huge advocate of extreme programming XP, which still sounds ridiculous to say, but kind of a precursor to Agile. And the entire emphasis was run these whole teams, where don't draw a distinction between coding and design, and then like just really sit with the customer, understand what they're trying to do, build it out. So that was my first, the first 6 years, yeah, 4, 5, 5, 6 years of just trying to help small businesses, but really the end-to-end software delivery for them.
So that effectively was rather than going to university at the time, it was jumping straight into that. So you were really just sort of hyper scaling your jump into technology through this. And it sounds like you had some good mentors.
Yeah, hyperscale is probably the wrong term to use. Like that early technology, we were working with dozens of concurrent users on these applications.
At a
But
human
then
level. At a
at
human
a
level,
human level, yeah.
as an Alex hyperscale, not a VB6 hyperscale, not a, but yeah, as a U level.
Yeah. I will say that that did change in the last year that I worked for that company. We actually landed a huge contract, which was Jeb Bush was at the time pushing the digital transformation for the state of Florida. This was the myflorida.com. It was one of the first states to really go online, and got to work on my first truly like at scale initiatives for that. And that's where I started getting interested in some security unintended consequences of the work we do.
Well, yeah, that's a good transition. I want to go back to maybe right before that, though. You made
Yeah.
a kind of I thought it was a good statement on that the lesson out of that phase, kind of maybe pre-security, was that done equals the customer can use it. And
Hmm.
I, that's a super simple statement, but I really love it because of I don't know that we operate in that world anymore. I think done is it gets sold in many cases, right?
Actually,
Done is when the PO hits, and not that the customer can. Why did we change that? And that leads into security, because you say you told me you believe that the security industry is maybe most guilty of this,
yeah,
of
this
not following that.
the security industry and security teams are very guilty of this for a lot of like well-intentioned reasons, but it is one of those lessons I've kept with me really deeply ingrained throughout my career is that technology serves people. People have to be able to use it. And too often we look over that design and user experience. I think it happens in two places in security. You mentioned the security industry. It certainly happens there where so many buying decisions are made removed from the people who are actually going to be using the software. That's not unique to security. It happens in a lot of places. There are some multi-billion-dollar SaaS companies that were definitely not purchased by people who are actually going to be using that software. But when it happens in security, it's just particularly painful. And you see more and more CISOs now really removing themselves more from the buying decision, empowering their teams bottoms up to like, all right, who's actually going to be using this? Can they use it? Is it solving problems for them? And I think that's a really, really, really healthy best practice. The other place that you see this is internal security teams like to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit more than they should. And they start to believe that security is the top priority. We've all heard it from our companies. It's in everyone's S1 IPO statement, every SEC filing, every public statement. And too many security teams start to naively believe that it's true. All right, we're going to do this because security is important. And the hard reality is No, usability and getting the job done is the priority. And when security starts butting up against that, if you're not designing with that user experience in mind, it's just going to be friction for everybody.
Well, and I think maybe even a level above that is profitability is first, then maybe usability, and then security is a distant, right? I mean, if you, but to your point, it is, there is this sort of, look, it's a hell of a thing to have the passion to want to be in information security and want that to be the core of your life. These individuals live this as their, it's almost a religion to many, and rightfully so, because sometimes you have to have that, because the job can be so bad sometimes that you have to have the passion to sort of stick with it. There's nothing else I'd rather be doing, right, than what I'm doing now. But sometimes days are tough, as you well know. However, with that, you sometimes have that Kool-Aid effect. Good Jim Jones reference there, Alex. To some people may get that, some may not. Um, where you default to believing that your religion is should be the priority when it's
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
and usability be damned and uptime be damned and all this rest. As an extreme example, I know of organizations that have elected to leave an adversary inside an environment as to not disrupt manufacturing operations. The assembly line was still running. They know they had a nation state inside, and they elected to keep running. And this is a CEO level decision, and it makes
Mhm.
the security folks mad. Now, related to that is what you're talking about too, related to, which is all connected to me when you're developing and creating and making new. That sort of usability versus security statement. Same example, just one's
Absolutely.
development and one's operational.
Yeah, I do intend to apply broader than just it's essential in software design, but it applies
Mhm.
to policy making, process
Mhm.
design, decision making. It's pretty universal.
So you told me, my question to you is, so why does this happen? Why do we talked about that it does happen? Why do security people? Why are they so good at being bad in this way?
Oh man, yeah, this is probably what you're referring to, where we could definitely talk for more than the allocated period of time because there's it's such a complicated problem. There's so many pieces that go into it. Um, I think rather than trying to enumerate all of them, I'll talk for the areas that I've had to watch out for the most
Yep.
in my career for it. Um, the first one is just fundamentally accepting that security is not the top priority. There's this statement that Mike Rowe of Dirty Jobs loves to do, where you see all these signs across all the jobs that says safety first, and you quickly realize that like safety is not the first priority here. And so he's really trying to evangelize this safety third concept. And I think internalizing that as a security leader and a CISO is just essential across the entire business. Like there is no world where we are more than third priority out there.
Yeah.
And just make peace with that. Be okay with that, and it will help you get so many different decisions right in how you navigate stakeholders and navigate decisions and navigate all the trade-offs in this in this thing. It's just like that alignment of that expectation.
So
Um,
we're gonna. Oh, go ahead. I thought we were shifting off of this. Yeah, continue, please.
no, 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 no. Well, let's just start with that one because I do think that is by far the biggest. If you're going to change one thing in how do I better align with the business, it's that. It's security third.
Yeah, that's it's kind of a different type of hot take, but it's someone will often say, well, there's some that argue, they say customer first, and I think that's philosophically good, but some would also say that maybe it's employee first, and then if they're happy, they'll make sure their customers are first, right? That's sort of a kind of another hot take on sort of a strange order of operations, not directly related, but maybe kind of. You started to hint at your flirting with leaning into security. So, what was your first security job, or when did you start sort of working thematically on security?
um, So we were talking about that project. So we were doing a contract. The first system where I really started leaning into security was we were tasked with digifying all of the online prison records for the Florida Department of Corrections. So this is one of the only states to have done this, but you can go look up online prison records for anyone in Florida. Which, fun aside, one of the unintended consequences of that was you've probably seen or may have heard of Jimmy Kimmel's early radio show. They did a Florida or Germany skit, which was like reading this just crazy
Right.
headline and like, is this from Florida or is this from Germany? That system enabled that, right? Like online prison records with photos of the perpetrators enabled a ton of articles about this in Florida and Germany, where there's crazy things that happen in both places. But they were also two of the first places to bring prison records and arrest records online and digital. And that was one of the fun unintended consequences of it. But one of the other ones was it immediately started getting hacked. And this was young, naive me, very excited about bringing things online. This was incredible in that period of time. And then to just see like bad things start happening with something that you were creating across a huge spectrum was just kind of soul crushing at the same time. You go from this like we're creating something amazing to why is this happening to me? And I just really decided like that's the way I'm going to add value to the rest of these projects more is let's dig into where are they getting attacked? How are they getting attacked? And in those scenarios, it was all kind of network security at the time. It was kind of like basic firewall and access controls and authentication stuff. So I got I'm fortunate for that because it was kind of a hard pivot from software design, software security into network security and access controls and the broader security space. And the two really codependent functions on each other.
It's interesting you bring that up. So I worked in developer support. So I was an engineer, then developer support, and then web infrastructure, kind of all together. And this is a long time ago. But my interest in security was we had an audit, and there was some problems with the web server itself and permissions and a lot of other things. It was a system that I inherited, but I was now responsible for, and it was bad. And that began kind of a 3-year journey of looking to how do we most effectively harden these systems, and that triggered my interest in security. So it was sort of a bad audit and some problems with infrastructure that got me interested. It was a financial system, so it wasn't as exciting as like mugshots, but there was I was offended. I was kind of pissed off, frankly, that they're like, well, there's problems with the thing you built. I'm like, or the thing that you support. I'm like, I don't like the sound of that, right? So there was this drive to figure out, to not be at the center of that kind of attention and to figure out what the problem was. And then that ended up becoming my career, interestingly enough. So, public shaming was sort of the thing. So how long did you work to rectify the issue related to this website, and how quickly did you have sort of your second or third project that was more security focused, or did it just all
Oh, I'm still working on it. We have not solved it yet. We're still trying to figure out how to build
solving
secure
it for
software.
Alex, not necessarily for the industry? Yeah.
Um, yeah, the next like getting back into software security was something that I knew I wanted to do, and I ended up. I spent about 4 years working in broader security for the state of Florida, not in direct software development, and then went to a company called WebSense, where
Yeah.
was traditionally a productivity tool. If you've ever been in a library or at a school network and were told you weren't allowed to access a website, that was probably WebSense's a database doing that and categorizing that. And the CTO at the time, and a lot of it was productivity, like, okay, you can't go to sports sites while you're at work, and no porn in the office, and things like that. But then the CTO, Dan Everett at the time, had the idea of we should block malicious websites and other things that are causing active harm to people. Let's go identify those, and spun up a small team to try to do at scale internet crawling, specifically looking for malicious websites. And so went to go bootstrap that, which was just so much fun. Like kind of hit the intersection of okay, clearly working on a security problem, clearly making software more secure, and like it's hard security, or sorry, hard software problems at the same time, and just really enjoyed my time there. The downside of that was it was a little too successful. We went from being a productivity company to it was by far the fastest growing segment of the business. And WebSense did a entire pivot to we're going to be a security vendor now, and let's bring in some senior leadership from McAfee and transform the company into a security vendor. And that did not go as well as you would expect.
Can you talk a little bit about that, and not looking for any deep cuts into anything, but as part of all of that success, the culture of the company surely changed. And, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but you were a part of a small group of people who made something that was really different. And I was a customer and understood the value. I remember at the time that came out, Richard Baitlick wrote a book called Extrusion Analysis. And one of the best ways you could find sort of things leaving the environment was if you had some sort of proxy server, whether you were using it within configuring the proxy in your browser or some sort of pack file or whatever was, or some other mechanism, getting insights into what's leaving, you could do some really great analysis. And this is early days. But you built that, and now it gets big, and now it becomes a bigger business, and we hire more people. Did the culture of the company change?
The culture changed, but in one specific way that is more related to just the point we were talking about earlier. Is who are we building for? What are we trying to do? So it changed from this is fundamentally about helping people use the internet more effectively to we're a gatekeeper, and there's everything out there is bad, and we've got to be as restrictive as possible. And you forget that it's not the security team trying to solve a malicious website problem. That's the customer. That's who you're directly selling to. That's who's paying the business. That's who's trying the business. There's several orders of magnitude more people on the other side of that are just trying to use the internet. And when you pivot too hard to security as the outcome, it just completely changes the relationship of the software that we were building and what it was trying to do. And I think financially, the business was a major success, right? It was a $1.9 billion acquisition to Raytheon, rebranded as ForcePoint, is doing really well now as a security vendor, but made a lot of people's lives probably more difficult relative to the security benefit they were receiving.
I think that's something that maybe that security teams don't take enough stock of, where the way I would phrase it is, if you go in and meet a new security team or talk to a CISO and you ask, well, how does your company know you best? And some may have a good answer, but others may say, well, we know you from phishing training. We know you when you block us from trying to do something like your example.
Yep, that's exactly right.
And we know you when we have an access issue. So we know your help desk or your access operations. We know when we get a pop-up saying you can't do that, and we know you when you fail maybe a phishing training. And the reason why I bring that up is that's some pretty bad PR.
Oh, yeah.
And I think many people, and then to amplify that as an example with a phishing training, is many people, I've been in rooms before where CISOs have bragged of people that have had disciplinary action or even been let go because of failed behavior, not because they were malicious, but because they were just sloppy, which is still dangerous, but it's not malicious. And so I think sometimes, which may be to the root of all of what you're talking about, we do a really bad job at sort of self-marketing and advertising. We lean heavy into the negative, which I think is the core of a lot of what the spirit of what you're talking about. Agreed?
It's such a good point, Steve. I would kind of so plus one, the top one of like, if you're in a CISO, you've got to be thinking about how to celebrate successes, not successes of security, but successes of where you enabled the business to get something done. And it's worth talking about it. It's worth reminding people of about. There's definitely a marketing function within CISO within any type of CISO function. We don't like to think about ourselves as having a marketing function, but every executive role does, and you just need, the sooner you can embrace that, the better. There's a second part of what you're talking about, which is a soapbox I love to get on, so I'll get on it here for a second. But one of the most toxic traits we have as an industry is we love defaulting to victim blaming in so many different contexts. Whether somebody had a breach or somebody clicked on a phishing link or is doing something they're supposed to, we regularly need to remind ourselves to, like, no, 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 no. There's an actual adversary out there. There's an actual attacker. That's who we need to be shaming. That's the person we need to be calling out as this, and everyone else involved in the process is a victim. And like you need to have some type of grounding empathy that you bring to the job to regularly remind yourself of, like, everyone you're working with is the one who's under attack that we're trying to protect, and is not the enemy in this process.
There is a desire often in our community for us to make commentary when other people, the example you gave, if they've had a breach. And it is an attractive one where, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter or even PR agencies wanting you to make commentary, depending on the job you have. And it is sensational. It's a chance for people to steal some spotlight. And many of us in this sort of, LinkedIn world of self-celebration, there's a desire to do that. And I find that the thing to remember is that for every big problem, every breach, is a security team that's working their ass off and not sleeping, not seeing their family, trying to remedy the issue. And that same security team may or may not have warned about the situation that they're going through already. And it's that adversary that you mentioned, whether it's criminal or nation state or whomever, or it may not have even been them. It could have been something in their supply chain that was corrupted that sort of caused this larger issue. And so it is a major red flag when we sort of see this. We're really good at sort of eating our own. And I don't know where we get that from. At scale, by the way. I don't have a strong opinion as to where it comes from, but it's something that I see all over. Primarily in North America, interestingly. It's a North American. I don't see it in other areas of the world. I have a global role, and so I get to travel all over and meet leaders in lots of really interesting places, but it seems to be almost uniquely North American. Opinions on that as an adjunct to your soapbox, which I love?
If I apply my own advice and apply a little bit of empathy to the victim shamers out there, we have gotten very disillusioned by what we perceive to be negligence in regards to our security, our privacy, our data with many, many corporate entities. So there are many instances where it is deserved. There should be accountability here. There were basic practices that weren't followed, or something of that sort. So there's a fine line to walk between them, because you need to. We need to drive better security practices across the entire industry, and part of that is about making people feel ashamed for not preventing something that they could have prevented, or doing something irresponsible that they should have done. I just find that in the moment of an attack is the worst place to do it. And if I was going to hedge from there, just say, like, at least make sure you're blaming both of them in the same breath or in the same sentence. And it's not a simple problem. Each one is a little bit different. But to just immediately jump to blaming who was ever attacked is highly problematic. It's almost always more complicated than that.
Well, furthermore, you don't know what went down, and you don't know how long they've been working on the issue. There's people that'll make commentary the day of a breach that have no insights into what's actually happening, and they make very broad analytical leaps into some sort of idea as to what may or may not have happened. And
I could have fixed that, or but that wouldn't have happened in my company or
right,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
my product self.
yeah,
That yeah.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, so I want to go a little bit into. You talked about WebSense. Um, I want to make a point here for the listener. Anyone who listens knows that we don't we talk about careers and we talk about this concept of virtual mentorship, and we share these sort of soapbox items and hot takes and mentorship pieces and failures and all the rest. But I have a real interest in sort of the technical entrepreneur and the CISO entrepreneur, and that's one of the things that you bring to the table. So you're at HackerOne. This is not a commercial for any vendor, but I think what's interesting and what you can bring to share is maybe the genesis story of how you go from WebSense into ultimately what you've done into sort of this wearing multiple hats, because and the reason is through the lens, there's many listening that want to also maybe start their own small business. Maybe they have funding, maybe they don't. They want to work for themselves, either starting off young, or maybe it's their sort of second career. So, how did you end up? Where did that come from? I'm guessing it was more complex than I made it sound, but ultimately you became an entrepreneur. How did that happen?
Yeah, the one quick step. Let's just there's one step in between that. Went from WebSense to after we had a transition to a security company. I wanted to get back into a proper engineering team, and I wanted to work on a big engineering problem where there were going to be unintended security consequences. And so I ended up starting the product security team at Facebook pretty early on, like the first security team there, which is part of that. And a few years there is what led me to the concept of HackerOne. Like, and my orientation at Facebook was very much there's so much that we just don't know as this is evolving. We need more feedback loops coming into the security program. So my entire security program is product security, not the full end-to-end security, was all oriented around feedback loops, around how do we get as many feedback loops into the software development teams as we can. And just asking ethical hackers on the internet turned out to be one of the most almost accidental but effective things that we did. It was immediately the highest value signal loop that we had. Like, everything that came from that was like here is a problem that we need technical resources on right away. It just kind of cut through all the debate that we had from some of the other channels.
So
And
sorry to interrupt, and I told you I'd interrupt you a couple of times.
please
It was not too
go
long of an
ahead.
answer, but and from my position right now, not being there in that time, I would make the assumption that Facebook, first off, was well funded and had every tool they needed, and probably had lots of telemetry, lots of signals. Again, I'm not saying that that's the case, but as an opinion in the uninformed mind, you would say you were probably swimming in information. Like, how the hell did you guys go from a point to say, hold on, and by the way, you own the whole stack, right? You probably knew your environment, I'm going to hope, more than most organizations know theirs, because it was so mission focused, right? And you had this environment. I'm really kind of amazed that you were saying, all right, you know what? We need even more visibility. We need even more perspectives. We need this conscript army to also look at uh, all of our environment. How did you get to that? I would not have expected that to have been a need. So I'm fascinated by that
Okay.
point. Old hat
Well,
to you. Yeah,
let's talk
go
about
with
that
that.
for a second. Let's talk about that for a second, and then we'll come back to the entrepreneur, because this is I love this dynamic for it. So there's two things. One is the technology that Facebook was producing at scale was pretty incredible, and most of it was they were the first time it was happening. Right, there was not a lot of off-the-shelf software or services at that scale.
Mm.
And then two, the pool of adversaries was deep, right? Like, this doesn't exist in a vacuum. Everybody has threat models. Everyone has an appropriate level, and the number of threats in a environment like Facebook was a long list relative to
Right.
some other businesses. So you have to factor those two things into account for it. But then you're right, which is the standard security industry tools were not solving it, and I was in a very fortunate position of having a near blank check to explore all of them, which is not a thing you hear from most CISOs, but it was true for a period of time for product security at Facebook. But for example, my team commercially deployed 4 different commercial static analysis engines. We were like, all right, most people would like do an eval, pick one, and accept the trade-offs. We're like, we're going to run 4 of them in parallel, and concluded after that of it's still missing too much. And so we staffed up an engineering team to go build our own internal static analysis tool, which is now later was open sourced. And there's just not a commercial problem. So just that one narrow stream of, okay, static analysis, let's find vulnerabilities in source code. How hard could that be? Turns out to be a very hard problem.
Right.
The pen testing, we scaled it from annual pen tests to, I had 40 pen testing vendors. We set the goal of we want to kick off a pen test every week. So the pen testing program was kicking off a new pen test every Monday. We were running about 70 a year. Not enough. Still not enough feedback. It's still getting hacked. And so that was the like, well, let's just. And every once in a while, someone would just email us in saying, "Hey, I found a problem. I can hack you like this," and we're like, "Great!" Our 40 pen test vendors, our 4 static analysis vendors, all missed that. Thank you. We're gonna go fix that now. So that's the background there, Steve. Is I think we have a real narrow appreciation for just how hard this challenge is of like, let's produce software that doesn't have any bugs or can't be hacked or can't leak data it's not a solved problem, and we cannot pretend like it's a solved problem.
See what I did there for you? See that nice little vignette that you unpacked? That's a fantastic set of examples that I think sets up really everything wonderfully. I really like the answer to this, and I hadn't. I mean, 70 pen tests a year is astonishing. Like,
And I want to do a shout out there. Like we were hunting for top tier pen testers, right? This was
oh, I'm sure.
Leviathan, ISEC partners, Include Security, Trail of Bits. This was, it was, yeah.
I mean,
It's still astonishing to me that like you throw the best talent that we have who deliver phenomenal feedback and definitely make the systems better. And still, no,
still not
we're not
enough.
there yet. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many methods of access and federation and features and integrations that I'm sure it was just over time it almost became it's this infinite of infinites, right? There's just you need another uh, set of eyes for sure, and that becomes more clear. So when did the moment you're sitting there at Facebook and you're doing all this stuff and you have all this extra sort of outside help, and there has to be just a backlog of fixes that are and still not enough, right? Is my guess. When are you sitting there? Was there one moment where you're like, you know what? Other people have this problem. I ought to
Yeah.
build this. I ought to make this a thing. Was there a point in time, or did it, did you leave and then do it? Were you thinking about it as you were there?
Yeah, so let me give qualify this a little bit because you asked the question before, which was advice to entrepreneurs, and I have tremendous imposter syndrome with that title. I don't view myself as a entrepreneur. I didn't set out to create the business that we did. This was a problem and a solution that I just became obsessed with. And I do want to apologize for the listeners as we get into this next part of it. Like there's no way to describe this without it be sounding like a sales pitch for HackerOne, but I do mean it generally. So let me just talk about it that way. I just became obsessed with it. So we talked about those pen testing programs, which were fantastic, and we're delivering findings throughout the year. The weekend we launched the bounty program, we did it it was a Friday night at DEF CON, so we announced it at. Very overconfident. We were like, oh, yeah, this like we're going to get some findings, but no, we're doing all the right stuff. Like how much we find here? We had over 300 valid, unique findings by Monday morning, and nothing in my career even came close to that. Around like, let's just, and it sounds so quaint in hindsight, like, let's just ask the community, hey, how would you hack it? Turns out the hacker community is pretty freaking good at hacking people who ask for it.
Right.
And then, to Facebook's credit at the time, Facebook got a lot of things wrong, but like the engineering team just rallied around it. Like the engineering called it, convened teams. We paused roadmaps, like and got through those vulnerabilities in kind of in record time. So the pain for me in that privileged position was actually relatively minor. Like other organizations, I might have been fired for what we were doing. But so I became obsessed with this as a solution, but also equally naive about the solution, right? And so I started this process into HackerOne of like, oh, everybody should go do this. Why isn't everybody doing this? Turns out the reason why everyone isn't doing it is because most organizations really struggle if you show up with 300 new vulnerabilities over the weekend.
Right.
And so my entire journey started with that problem of like, okay, clearly there's valuable feedback out there, but organizations just can't consume it in a productive manner. We have to vet it, we have to slow it down, we have to scope it, we have to balance all, and so it ends up being this the complicated part there is not asking a bunch of hackers to hack stuff. They're really good at that. The complicated part is doing it in a way where you can actually then translate it into something the business can go do something about. And I just became obsessed with that. It happened to align with the business opportunity, but that's the only advice I can really give entrepreneurs on that front is find a problem you really care about. And if other people happen to care about it, you can probably build a business out of it.
Yeah, that's you've said a couple things here, and I want to say it again. This is not there is no relationship between our organizations. This is not paid. This is Alex is an interesting person show. So for those that may wonder or ask, again, this is what we have here. But I think the journey and the advice is worth listening to for those that want better security outcomes, but also that, to your point, want to become maybe an entrepreneur. Make sure you really like it, and if you're obsessed about it, to your point, maybe it could be profitable, or maybe it could be interesting. Maybe you can build a community around something. Maybe people might pay you for it. Maybe not, but that's the rub. Um, so, Facebook is a great company. At some point,
Pros and cons, yeah.
you had to. I mean, yeah, it has some prestige, right? And sounds like you had a pretty good gig there. At some point, though, can you say were you working on this while you were still there? Do they allow that, or was that too secret? Is that too much of a hot topic? Were you
Oh, no,
working on it?
no. Yeah, very, very transparent about it. Went through a conflicts committee process. It started as a side project. I wasn't expecting it to be a business. Some of the that feeds the entrepreneur imposter syndrome is that I didn't start working on this project as a business to start with. And yeah, the Facebook's conflict committee was pretty direct of like, yeah, we're not getting into cybersecurity. We generally think the internet would be better if more people did this.
Yeah.
It actually started as an actual business project. It's like some of the biggest risks coming into Facebook's bounty program was vendors and third parties and partner providers. So I started my crusade on like everyone should be doing this a little bit out of self-preservation, which is like, no, we actually need Twitter to be doing this, and we need Zynga to be doing this, and we need all of this long tail of partners to be doing this because we don't exist in a vacuum. Like there are risks to our users with many other applications out there. So that was the impetus of it. It started as a actual Facebook security project
Yeah.
before we kind of cleared conflicts and forked it out.
So you said you had a. I'm sure you have more than one. You gave us one soapbox. What's
What's
another
my quota?
soapbox
How
that
many?
you
How
have?
many?
What's another one that you have that is something that you think is a critical flaw within the security community? And then on the topic of anything, we didn't talk about this before, but you've seen a lot. What's if you could change one thing that's not necessarily tied to HackerOne, or that feedback loop that I'll call it, thematically. But what's another thing that you think is just an absolute flaw with the way security people do their work?
Yeah, there's one that's particularly top of mind for me. We're kind of just touching on it in that last conversation, um, but I think it's getting even more. Sorry, I was about to go to AI and I was about to caveat it. I'm about to jump into an AI topic because I do think AI is part of the reason why
No, no.
this is happening, but I mean it genuinely.
Go there.
As we start seeing a ton of investment in AI, I see a going back to one of my favorite soapboxes in the past, which is we love pointing out problems. We love finding a vulnerability, finding a breach, finding one of those things. And the security industry does not love being part of the solution generally. Too many of us view it as our job to be like, hey, we found all the problems, fix it, make it go away. And what I observe happening right now as we start seeing a bunch of security teams invest in AI is we are giving a disproportionate amount of time and energy to AI that is finding problems or pointing out problems, and not nearly enough to the potential of AI to triage problems, prioritize problems, clarify problems, add context to problems, fix problems. And I think the big risk I see with all of us in security team, whether you're a vendor or a CISO or in any aspect of it, is the biggest opportunity for AI right now is to help us fix the stuff we know about more efficiently. But I see so much of our time and energy and VC funding going into the we got to find more problems orientation, and it's not where we're at. It's not what we need.
I I I think I have a similar thought on this. It's not exact, but my I think there's some amazing opportunity in AI in specifically looking at some of the old problems
Mhm.
that security teams face. And I'll give you a really boring example. We are awful at knowing our own network and knowing who owns what. We're really bad at asset lists. We are absolutely garbage at that. I don't know how many incidents I've worked in my life. Well, I can end the sentence there. I can't remember even how many incidents I've worked, but even beyond that, of landing on a set of problems and say, who owns this system? Who's the business owner? Who's the technical owner? Or how big is this network? How many assets do I own? And having something that can catalog, tag, and group and build something as simple as your own generative kind of notion of build me documentation about my own environment that I don't even know what the hell I have. That's a
Steve,
fundamental issue, massive issue. If I were going to do two startups right now, they would be the most boring startups ever. One would be asset list AI, and the other would be compliance AI, meaning tell me how to answer the same question to lots of different people and tell me what I have on my network and sell it as a widget. And those are some boring things. There's a lot of remediation. Everyone has an innovation center and a digital transformation officer. I want a remediation officer. I want a boring officer, an officer of boring, leftover, forgotten things. And if you want to improve things like uptime and resiliency and recoverability and reduce the ability for an adversary to maintain persistence on an environment, typically using accounts or systems that you can't see or don't know about. Those are the things I would do, either to save time, the sort of the audit and compliance thing, right, which I know people are working on. But this idea of the remediation officer AI kind of thing, I would create that. Not very sexy, but boy, it's some of uh, that that same kind of work, right? And I think it kind of aligns with what you've mentioned to find what are opportunities to solve old problems, not generate new ones.
you asked me for soapboxes earlier, and you just hit another one. I'm gonna jump right back on
Well,
for a
let's hear it.
second. Like you started talking about the thing I need as a security team is a list of all my assets and all of these things, and I immediately go to the security team. should not be the one who owns
Oh,
the list of assets.
you,
Like, but the number of times a CISO decides, oh, I'm going to go buy something from a vendor that's going to be the source of truth for all my business assets. Like, no, you're not. That is, it is. There's a bunch of vendors out there that would love to try to sell you some attack surface management and your single pane of glass with all of your business assets, and it is not the way. Like, that is not what a security. You're hitting the right problem, which is, okay, I need good data, I need good information, I need an asset inventory. But if you take that one step forward of like, well, I can't trust the business to do that,
right.
so I'm going to go do it myself. You've already gone. You've just failed. It's you're not going to end up in a happy place by doing that. So with the challenge in being an effective CISO is to go one step further, and sit down with the CIO today and be like, I know you would also like to have an accurate asset inventory. Every CFO and every CIO and every head of engineering would equally love to have that. Why? What are you struggling with? Help me understand that challenge. How do we solve this together? How do we as an executive team align and decide we need a source of truth asset inventory that we can all depend upon? What are the real problems that exist there that are preventing us from having that? And that's the organizations that successfully do that, and the CISOs that drive that transformations are the ones that you'll see start to make really meaningful progress on, you know what, I think I'm starting to get a handle on my attack surface and actually trust what they're seeing.
It blows my mind, this topic. I don't see it working well hardly anywhere, and I have the luxury of meeting, as you do, many security leaders, and generally they're fairly forthcoming because of my past, right? Even though they know I've sort of carried that water. But it is amazing when you can't go to procurement and say, how many assets do we own? And the fact that somehow they are not the one getting audited for an asset list, or the CIO or CTO, and somehow that burden falls most closely to the CISO. And many times then, so one topic I often talk about is, what do CISOs over own? What should they own more of, and what should they own less of? And I see this sort of maladjusted Venn diagram all over the world. I see a lot of over ownership. I see a lot of over ownership in things like, even like insider threat, which cuts across business areas. They over own that and they mess it up. It needs to be sort of shared. But on the technical tactical side, I see over ownership of this sort of asset list and ownership piece where you said it perfectly. I'll do it. The hell with it. I'll fix it.
Yeah.
No, this is a, how can you run a business and not know what assets you own and have an ownership? That's fundamentally amazing to me. A little bit of weird.
Turns out pretty effectively for a lot of businesses.
We don't know what we own.
Remember, yeah, security. Yeah, how many assets do I have is at best a top 25 priority for running a successful business by most definitions.
I mean,
And
yeah.
there's some adjustment to that. Yeah.
So maybe not that as exciting as it could be, but it's just one of those things that's a bit of a conundrum to me, that we still haven't really solved. But again, back to the opportunity of finding opportunity with something like artificial intelligence, generative AI. I think there's a massive future there and a great opportunity to get rid of a lot of the stuff that's a disinterest or a weakness. I try to outline myself as, I'm good at like 3 things. I'm really good at like 2 things. And then what am I disinterested in and what am I bad at? And then, so I try to always focus, okay, what can I do to leverage either automation at scale or maybe even utilization of technologies to work on my disinterests, or how do I build out a team that complements that, right? That's focused on that. But part of the team in the future is going to be little agents. Little agents are going to do things for us, right? So
Let's talk about that for a second. It's I share your observation that everything is going through some type of transformation right now with AI. Some of it more successful than others, and I think no one can be in a CISO right now and not be leaning into this. If you're still on the skeptical side of like, how much of it is hype, this isn't going to be there. I hope no one listening is still in that boat, but like lean into language models are here to stay. They're going to transform a lot of the way we currently do business. Um, the biggest trap I see security teams falling into right now is betting on AI as the latest silver bullet. It does seem like magic. It's going to absolutely transform things, but they're understanding the constraints and the pros and cons of it, are trying to stop it completely is where people fall. The successful AI deployments aren't just throwing everything to an agent as a black box. There's two things that they're doing really well. Um, One is they're coupling the AI with really well understood data models. Like, where do we really understood? What is the data? What is the context? What do we have? Um, and so, like the example we were just giving of, oh, I really would love an AI to go figure out what all of my assets are, is too broad and too unstructured of a problem to immediately see success on it. I think we're going to make some progress on that, but it's going to have to be more narrowly scoped for it. But that's step one. Is like, where do we actually have relatively good data and context on it? And then number two is there's this tendency to have them behave like we would expect security analysts to behave, which tend to be pretty one of the more privileged roles in the company and a little bit more open-ended on what actions they can take, what data they have access to, and what they can do. But where we're seeing, and we could talk a little bit about the downsides of that, but let me just talk about what we're seeing as successful, which is areas where you're putting very small agents into very specific tasks with very clear inputs and outputs on it. And it means breaking down security in kind of a process mapping that we have historically been pretty reticent to do.
Break into that a little more. So, a process map of security based on the individual. What do you mean by that?
Let's take a very um, pertinent decision of like, are we going to remediate this vulnerability? Should we remediate this vulnerability
Okay.
today? Um, there are many organizations out there that will not put into writing why something is an accepted risk,
Okay. Yeah.
right? And so if you do not have a clearly defined, demonstrably repeatable process for what risk will we accept or not accept at a broad level and a very specific level, you're going to run into problems when you start asking agents to do that for you. And so we haven't done it for two reasons. One is we love subjectivity and flexibility and judgment calls and intuition. There's a lot of that in security operations today, which is problematic for AI
Right.
agents. And two, we don't like being on the hook because we're tired of getting fired and criminally prosecuted for making risk decisions in certain areas.
Right.
And so, like, extending that fear of liability to AI agents is just a recipe for disaster.
We also, this is a little bit tactical, but we also love exceptions.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know that better than most, but organizations love exceptions for patching, for vulnerabilities, for certain business logic that gets a pass. Um, and that's a tough thing. So, especially when, let's say, an agent makes a mistake and either causes an outage or maybe it violates, a decision gets made in the future and it even violates something just like change control. Think of
Mm-hmm.
change control. That's a massive thing for many organizations. There's freeze windows, there's other things, but also that's depending on. So we are bad at managing exceptions based on lots of chained dependencies within the business. And I'm curious to see where that goes related to the future, right? You have sort of the idea of these chained agents, if I can enunciate, working on our behalf to solve these types of problems.
Yeah, so that gets to be a critical question is, do you give an agent the ability to make exceptions where you previously would have had a human do? Like, breaking it down to that level, there's really interesting challenges underneath there.
But,
And
but now that's not a security agent anymore. That is a business logic agent.
Yeah, good, good point. The security probably still on the hook for getting it to function appropriately,
True,
but
true,
yeah,
true. But you
yeah.
think of, you mentioned something earlier. There are organizations for legal reasons. Let's use let's use a security operations example, that don't want certain events logged, because if you log them or if you enrich an event, now you're legally responsible for it. Whereas, and this is a real thing, whereas if you don't log it or you don't trap it and you don't enrich it, you're now intentionally ignorant of it and therefore don't have to take action on it. It's
Mm.
not too dissimilar from, we only keep 30 days of email, not my company, but there are organizations I know that only keep 30 days of email and the rest is deleted. Why? You know the answer to this. Why would I only keep 30 days worth of email? For legal reasons.
As someone who has read their emails aloud multiple times in multiple courtrooms and depositions, I struggle with the answer to this question.
Yes, yes. I, 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 I myself have had to read my own emails and emails of others while being recorded, and in hot deposition rooms. And so that's why, right? So you have, and that all falls into this sort of really advanced, I think, this curious future of not only getting better at security, but not over owning. And a lot of the logic we need help with in order to do our jobs faster, the feedback loop isn't a security feedback loop necessarily, it's a business feedback loop.
Mhm.
I think. I could be wrong, but I mean, I think if we're going to sort of have these little bots, we need non-security bots to help the security agents, right? In essence. But I think covering your two main points, though, in terms of CISOs needing to lean in and being this sort of the theme of virtual mentorship on the show, which I hope we generally accomplish, is looking at these traps that you've outlined, right? So it's not a silver bullet. I think there's still sort of a lot of remedial type things we need to think about. Focusing on well understood data model. What's an example, just for those that are not deep into this or haven't thought about it as much as you have? What's an example of a really well understood data model that's common?
So let's take the end-to-end process of something like vulnerability intake and triage, which is universal across pretty much every product line. Is at some point in time, you've got some that needs to go in that needs to get assessed against a system. Um, there's a lot of different formats and a lot of different structures out there. And what I see too many teams start with is trying to exactly replicate what the analyst does today at kind of an end-to-end thing, which mixes in some structured data models with a bunch of subjective, sometimes undocumented success criteria. And trying to get an agent to do the latter part is problematic, but instructing an agent to say, hey, given this unstructured vulnerability report, I need you to standardize these 9 CVSS metrics against this. Agents do that a lot better than humans historically. And so it's finding the specific tasks where there's really cleanly structured inputs and outputs and objective measurements of success for each one of them that are the best fits for AI right now. I suspect that's going to be changing over time. I think the overriding part here is we've got to be leaning into this because we've got to understand how things are changing because it is changing pretty regularly. But the early AI success stories are generally matching that pattern of like there's clear objective feedback loops you can put in place to be like, all right, we asked an agent to do this specific task. Did they do it correctly? And did we observe that happening correctly hundreds or thousands of times? And you can apply that pattern to pretty much anything you'd like to do with an AI agent, whether it's in security or broader technology. So like even your example before of, okay, we need an agent to make an exception for an authorization issue. If you just try to get it to do that, you're probably going to get it wrong. But if you've got a process in place where it's like, all right, we've narrowed that down just to not the current human analyst process, but just that final mile of like, here all the context has been collected, everything's there. We just need someone to make this exception criteria. You're most of the way there. The one step that you need then is then some type of feedback loop on did the agent make the right exception decision? And whether you're doing that with human in loop or another agent or some type of audit process, you've got to make sure you've got that full end-to-end quality cycle for it. So as you think about this in your business, find the areas where that already exists is the starting point. where there's already some type of objective, quantifiable process quality control for that specific task. And you should already have agents deployed in all of those use cases. Like that's table stakes agentic adoption right now.
Interesting. I wonder if you had to then give an example operationally. So you gave foundational examples. You told us what those things are. You mentioned vulnerability management and AppSec. Is there another element that would be good to think about that's low hanging fruit? And this is not a loaded question. This is not a planted question. But another example through the eyes of an analyst, security analyst, through the eyes of a CISO, that could be a good opportunity where really they need either sort of advanced automation or content creation to support general operations related to adoption of AI. What's an area that you like?
See, this is the trap because it's every single area. And maybe I'm a bit of
You only get one.
becoming an AI zealot right now, but it is every aspect of pen testing. It is most aspects of application security review. It is SOC triage. It is inventory management. It's creating your board decks and upward reporting,
Yes.
big parts of audit workflow and evidence creation. It's hard to think of it. Flip that question around. Is there an area where you don't see it impacting? And that's a much shorter list. It's a much shorter list right now.
I think it's going to impact many areas, but the example I give, you can only spend money so fast, and you can only deploy, you can only make so many changes. And so the art of being a good leader, there's many things, is how do you specifically triage or your plan to say, okay, how am I going to adopt and integrate? And so I can't modify, or I probably can't modify all of those work streams at the same time
Yeah,
because
yeah,
of
yeah,
the
yeah.
because of the human effect and the training effect and the attention to quality that we should apply, and honestly the element of trust that we have to validate. And so I know you know all of this, and maybe I didn't ask the question.
Yeah, I know. I understand your intent now. So let me repeat the overall criteria I have. Right now, many of these initiatives are getting funded, but that's a temporary window where you're going to see that happen. And so, as a CISO, don't go and prioritize the AI use cases that are very open ended or the most grandiose ones. Have a long term vision for there. But your first AI projects, if you haven't started them yet, should be the areas that meet the criteria I was just talking about. There are clear inputs, outputs, and quantifiable feedback loops to measure how effective the AI was. Look for those. And so then you asked like specific examples of that. There's a ton of those in SOC, in access control, inventory management, threat intelligence and threat response, vulnerability management are the like immediate fields that come to mind where there's just a huge set of use cases. But within that, narrow that down, not to the most grandiose one, but just simple stuff. Like I'll just repeat the vulnerability management one for a second. It's you're not gonna don't have a big project to eliminate all of your VM analysts. Start with the project to say, we don't want those humans ever doing another CVSS score. That's a component of toil that a human should not be doing 12 months from now. Start with those projects, build trust, build familiarity with it, and then move on to the more advanced pieces of it before you start pitching the thing I'm guarding against here is there's too many CISOs that I see right now. They're leaning in on AI a little bit too aggressively, and they come from the like, we're going to have an agent replace this human. And there's not many human security jobs that are so well defined that you could just do that with a snap of your finger. So find the components of their job that you can absolutely. Our industry is more ripe than most for areas of extensive toil that you can have agents doing.
I completely agree there. It's going to be an interesting next 2 to 5 years.
Oh yeah.
This is going to be pretty wild, and it's even more. I lived through, kind of the year 2000 element, and seeing these changes into cloud and and this is the biggest inflection point I think, of all those phases. Having lived through them as a as an engineer, as an analyst, and then an executive of leading and running teams. This is our future is going to change greatly, and I'm excited to see it. And
The pace of change here is unlike anything we've seen in our lifetime. Like it's definitely accelerating. We have to pay attention to it. And so what the fine act we have to balance as security leaders is buying into that and reminding everybody about what's going to be possible very soon and what's possible right now. And the advice I have is a little bit counterintuitive to that, which is spend most of your time and energy on the low risk stuff that you can very clearly tackle with this, because it's moving so fast that will give you the confidence and the expertise to start tackling the more challenging ones. And the security AI projects that are failing is they start with that grand ambitious vision, which like, we're very close to that. We might be there in 6 months. We might be there in 2 years. We're very much approaching powerful AI intelligence that can do that. But if you're a typical CISO who has to build trust, who is constrained by resources, don't start there. Start with the kind of the benign toil.
yeah, try to maybe even boil that down is try to find a quicker win, especially when you consider the tenure of a lot of these security leaders as well, right? So have something that in the eyes of the changing technology and the rate of change, find something that maybe is a shorter window of opportunity, which there's plenty of, to your point. So
quick wins that you can measure. Yes.
yeah, measure. I think certainly measurement as well. Alex, we are way over time, but it's been completely worthwhile. I think the listeners will certainly enjoy all of what you've shared. As we ask every guest, and you're more than a CISO, but pursuant to the name of our show, the new CISO, what does being a new CISO and entrepreneur and all the other accolades that you've got, what does that mean to you?
Don't blur the lines with your AI and software teams, which has probably been perpetually good advice for CISOs ever. We have not done it well. There's a change happening where if you are not doing that and not really making sure that your security teams are very, very closely aligned with your AI and your software teams, you are not going to be succeeding 3+ years from now. It is a major shift in how we approach building safe, trustworthy businesses.
Alex, thank you so much for your time. I know there's so much more we could have covered. Maybe we'll do that again in the future. But I really appreciate you being a part of this virtual mentorship exercise.
I love this concept. Thanks so much, Steve. Have a good one. Appreciate it.
You as well. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of the new CISO. Thank you for listening. Check out more episodes on exabeam.com/podcast, and remember to rate, review, and subscribe to get brand new episodes first.